Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1 o'clock on the East Coast, so that means it's time for another edition of Automotive Training News. I'm your host, Brandon Hardison. Glad to be with you. Glad you can join us today. The reason being, you need to go find another person at your dealership. Please find a manager if you can, because we are honored to have with us a person that gave up some of his time because he's way on the West Coast. He didn't have to do this, but you're going to gain from this knowledge. Now, because he is what he is, I usually tell people to tell him about himself, but I want to share this with you because it's printed and I'm going to read it just for a second. Mr. Ben Gay III has been called a living legend in the sales world. In his 40 plus years of professional selling and sales training, he has been the number one salesperson in I repeat, in every organization that he's ever worked. So thank you, Ben. But my first question, who instilled that winning drive, that attitude in you?
My father.
Okay.
I was raised around successful people in near your home. I was raised in Atlanta, in the suburb of Eastlake, right out the front gate of Eastlake Country Club. And I grew up around the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola, whoever it was at the time,
Right.
the founders of Home Depot, et cetera. And the only rule was that I had to be quiet. I could go in the men's grill and sit with all these wonderful people as long as I was quiet. And my father said, if you're asked a question, only speak if you're asked a direct question.
Okay.
And then answer with a yes or a no. But he said, take notes. And so I did. So it set my, to quote Jim Newman, a good friend of mine who coined the term comfort zone.
Yes.
It set my comfort zone high. I didn't know that there were unsuccessful people. Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but generally everything I saw, all my relatives, they all own their own business. They were all in selling. I just thought that's what you did.
Wow. So is that what inspired you at age 14 to start out on your own, or?
Well, it inspired me because my father told me to get up off my rear end and go do something. He came home from work early one day, and there I was sitting where I was when he left. And he suggested I get a job. I said, I'm only 14. He said, then create a job. Well, I don't know what I do. Why don't you mow lawns? I don't have a lawnmower. He said, we have one in the basement, has a handle on it. You've probably seen it with the wheels. Go out and mow lawns. So I did that on a hot summer day in Atlanta for about 2 lawns. Came back to the house, went into retirement. He came home and found me in the same chair again. And I said, Dad, I really don't like that. And he said, okay, I'm going to teach you some secrets. What you do, he said, the kids don't like to make cold calls or whatever he called them at the time. You don't seem to mind talking to anybody. So you go sell the jobs, tell the people to pay you, don't set a fee, tell the people to pay you what they think it's worth when you're done or your friend is done. And then you collect the money and make sure the job was done right. Then you give your friend half the money. And I said, why would they work for half the money? He said, because you're going to get paid 2 or 3 times what you would have asked for if you let them pay you after the job's done. And sure enough, it doubled and tripled. I remember once doing a lawn for somebody, I probably would have charged them $10. It wasn't just a lawn, it was some cleanup. And I had 2 friends working on it. And when we got done, the lady handed me $100 bill. And when that's 60 years ago, over 60 years ago, $100 bill was something to write home about.
Correct.
So in the growing season in Atlanta, I usually had 20, 25 kids working for me, and I never had to mow a yard.
Wow. Look at you. So that segued into the MLN and network marketing, or how did that transition?
Well, my father explained to me carefully, but I wasn't listening numerous times that I wasn't going to inherit anything. I wasn't going to get the family business, that I had to make it on my own. And I nodded, yeah, okay, okay. And then I left home, and then I got married, and then I got my first little apartment in downtown Atlanta, right across from the Fox Theater and the
Okay.
Georgian Terrace Hotel at the Ponce, which is
Mhm.
an upscale place, but ours was 2 rooms, uh, not 2 bedrooms, 2 rooms,
Just 2 rooms.
$75 a month.
Uh-huh.
And I had half of the bachelor furniture from my apartment with my running buddy, Jimmy Rucker, the greatest salesman who ever lived, by the way. And I looked around, and my comfort zone kicked in. I thought, I've seen this in, movies like The Grapes of Wrath, but I've never lived in it.
Right, right.
And I was putting my wife through nursing school, or supposed to be. It was just starting. So I whipped out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, started reading want ads. And in the help wanted section, I qualified for nothing. I was a high school graduate. I couldn't type,
Okay.
nothing.
Yeah.
Got all the way down to psychologist, soothsayer, nothing. So as I was getting ready to throw the newspaper in the trash can, I saw business opportunities. I saw a little ad. It said, if you know anything about marketing plans and want to make more money, dial this number. Well, I didn't know what a marketing plan was, but I sure need to make more money. So I answered the ad. Long story short, the guy was very abrupt with me and hung up, but he told me where he was, because I was questioning him to see if he was qualified to work with me.
Correct.
And it turned out that day, 2 people, I don't know what the circulation of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was in those days, but 2 people answered that ad, me and Jimmy Rucker. I count us as one, and a curly-headed guy from South Carolina named Zig Ziglar.
Yes.
So September 15th, 1965 at noon at 1447 West Peachtree Suite 300, Ziegler, Jimmy Rucker, and I launched for the first time. Zig was 18 years older, but he'd not had a big hit yet. He was just peddling cookware in South Carolina.
Gotcha.
So we all joined the same company and took off together.
It's now, I don't know if they're listening, but you said the importance of listening 4 times in different various ways to your father. And so I hope the salespeople are catching in on that. But here's my question. With all of those powerful people that you started with, and then some of the ones that you worked with afterwards, any takeaways? I know all of them are unique, because I'm looking at Napoleon Hill along with Rucker and some of the other ones. Any takeaways that you got from any one of them that you could use?
Yeah, hundreds. I'm not sure sometimes where they leave off and I begin.
Okay.
I was just rather quickly. I won a national sales contest, year-long sales contest, and second prize was a Rolls Royce. Third was a Lincoln Continental. Fourth was a Thunderbird. Number 1, though, was the mystery prize. So I won the contest, was flown to California to acquire the mystery prize. And after a day or two with William Penn Patrick, the owner of the company, chairman of the board, it was revealed to me that the mystery prize was presidency of the company. I was 20. Yeah, that was my reaction. I was 25 years old, a high school graduate. Now I'm the president of a rapidly growing company. We were soon taking in $1 million a day. In 1967 dollars, that's about $3.5 billion today. I couldn't balance a checkbook, and I was running this operation. So I asked Bill, I said, how come it was a mystery prize? Somebody would have killed themselves if they'd known it was presidency of the company. He said, well, it was a mystery prize until I saw who won it. If the person who won it I didn't like, I would have changed the mystery prize, and maybe we would have given away 2 Rolls Royces instead of 1. So fortunately, he liked me, and I was launched, and that put me in the catbird seat. Everybody that was anybody in direct selling, speaking, consulting, and so on in those days was in our orbit or trying to get in our orbit. We were bigger than Amway and Shackley combined at the time.
Wow, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Man.
So it was the place. Somebody said to me one day, how did you meet Og Mandino? And I said, I think I left my office and went to the men's room and bumped into him in the hallway.
Okay.
You know,
I,
my point is, it was, how did you meet so and so? They were in the building. How'd you meet
that's
so and so? They were in the building.
yeah, yeah. Now, at a young age, how did it feel, or were you overwhelmed with trying to not only deal with the human capital, all these powerful individuals trying to grow and they got ideas? Any way to try to keep them on track to listen to you, the president, or I don't know what your leadership style was, or you just let them go do their thing and just let the chips fall where they may?
Well, it was an evolutionary thing. I was young and ignorant, so I probably didn't, I wasn't overwhelmed by the job because I didn't know I was supposed to be overwhelmed. But Dr. Hill was hired by William Penpatrick to be my personal one-on-one mentor.
Okay.
Paid $50,000 in today, that'd be about $500,000. And I equate it to Rodney Dangerfield, the old comedian,
Yes.
said that his family had to tie a pork chop around his neck so the family dog would play with him. Bill Patrick had to tie a $50,000 check around my neck so that Dr. Hill would be my friend. And but we developed into a really wonderful relationship. He wasn't in the building all the time. I probably visited him with him 15, 20 times max in the 2.5 years he worked for me before he died. But we became dear friends. And it's people like that. It goes back to my training at East Lake Country Club. It's now East Lake Golf Club, but East Lake Country Club. It goes back to my training there. I just listened. You sit in a boardroom when all the companies were in town from around the world, and my office had the big conference table in it. I just basically took over the conference room when I had to pick out an office. So all the board meetings were held there, and I just sat there. And, a group would come in from South Africa or Europe or here or there, speaking to us, sometimes with translators speaking through. And I found that if I sat and looked as intelligent as a 25-year-old could look and nodded, and I developed this, stroking my chin, you could find a whole lot out by just being quiet and asking occasional pertinent question. I saved the stupid questions for when I was alone with the controller or somebody, but just sit there and gradually you pick it up. And again, I was raised in that environment to start with. I didn't realize how handy it would come in, but when XYZ, when Og Mandino walked in, he was a great guy, just a friend. But when Og walked into my office, I wasn't overwhelmed. I knew I was making a lot more money than he was. And the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola and I had sat and talked. So why would I be overwhelmed with Og or anybody else?
Correct.
Then I started young enough and was there long enough I like to kid with some of my older friends. I say, as you know, I know who's who, what's what, where the bodies are buried, and what really happened.
There you go.
So
there you go. Well, did you know Og when he put out? I know he put out a whole lot of famous books, but The Greatest Salesman in the World seemed like every trainer in every vertical just went and grabbed that one. Did you know Og at that time?
I don't know because I knew Og and he worked for us and he was in seminars for us and so on. And I wasn't taking notes. I wasn't in awe of these people. So I wasn't taking notes about what they'd written before. Since I've read it, I've got a copy somewhere right here in the office, but I don't remember the order. With Og, he saved my life. He talked openly, as you may know, about suicide.
Yes.
And he was going to commit suicide one day, went to the pawn shop, and the gun he was going to get was, I'm making up numbers, but I think it was $39.99, which was, as he said, $39.99 more than he had. So he didn't have the money to commit suicide. Later, he was a raging alcoholic. Later, despondent again, he did have a gun and elected to commit suicide. And he said, Ben, I put the gun in my mouth and I tasted defeat. Gunpowder, gun oil, steel, I get, whatever. There is a distinct taste. And he said, I'm not going to be defeated. So I put the gun down and I became Og Mandino.
Beautiful story.
Wow. So fast forward a few years, I went through a very rough time financially, personally, etc. And sitting in my big house in Marin County, I got out my trusty 357 Magnum, waited till my wife was gone and the kid was at school and so on, then positioned myself where I would make the least mess out onto the back deck of outside my office,
Right.
put the gun in my mouth. It was cocked. I was ready to go. And when I put the barrel in my mouth, I tasted defeat. I flashed right back to Ogmandino. I thought, that's what he's talking about. I put the gun down and became Ben Gay.
There you go. I like that. That's a good story. Moving on for the few minutes we got, I got to ask you this concept of the closer series. How did that come to fruition?
Well, and by the way, we just added yesterday the Closers Part 4, which is we're adding to the series. We're going to have, I don't know, before I die, 15 or 20 probably, but did Part 3 not too long ago and so on. Back to Part 1. I had opened the 800 call center industry. I had invented the 800 call center industry with the National Communication Center. 95% of all Americans did not know that an 800 number was toll-free, didn't cost them anything. So I had to educate America, educate businesses, and then, frankly, I think I made up a statistic or two that if you had an 800 number in your ad, results would go up 40%. Well, it turns out I was light. It'd go up more than that, and now with websites and so on.
Yeah.
So, but we spent a lot of time going through newspapers and magazines and all looking for ads that didn't have an 800 number in it, and then we sent out a series of 5 letters. If you didn't join, you got all 5. Telling them why they ought to have one. And one of the little ads I clipped out was horribly written. I almost skipped over it. It was a little ad in the Wall Street Journal. I had out my pen knife and just about skipped over it, but it had something about closing in it.
Right.
And so I clipped it out to send it down to get the series of letters started for them. And then at the last minute, I thought, I'm going to put in, I wrote out a personal check and dropped it in. Truth is, if they had never sent the book, never responded, but cashed the check, I never would have known. It was just, well, several weeks later, arrived in the mail, something that looked like it came from an insane asylum, crayon markings on the outside of the envelope. I opened it up, and there was this beat up, well, it wasn't beat up, it was just not printed properly to start with, copy of the Closers, it said. And I flipped through it like you do with a book, did this, and pages shot all over the office.
Right.
So I got down, picked them up, and was going to throw them in the trash, but I thought, being cheap, I said to myself, I'll throw it in my briefcase. Back then, we didn't have movies on all flights everywhere or cell phones. So I'll throw it in my briefcase and read it the next time I'm bored out of my skull. I even had a disposal plan. And as I'm through with it, I'll put the pages in the back seat pocket. So I wouldn't have to do that. And that became what is now called the Closers Part 1. I read it, discovered I had stumbled across the Dead Sea Scrolls of selling. It was poorly written, misspellings, grammar that would have made my senior English teacher go through the ceiling. But it nailed selling the way it really is, not the way we wish it was. So, and I discovered that on a plane about halfway to New York. I realized I had stumbled across something. So I went to the payphone. Your listeners may not know what that is, but it was a phone on the wall with coins. You put in my magic coins and dial the number in the back of the book. A nice guy named Roy answered the phone, and I said, "Hi, I just finished reading the Closers." And he said, "Mr. Gay, how are you?" And I'm looking around. I thought maybe I was on candid camera or something. Wait, no caller ID. No.
Right.
And I said, "I didn't say who I was. How do you know that?" And he said, "Well, we printed 500 copies of that book at night in a printing company we had taken over without the owner's knowledge. None of us knew how to print. We came out with 500 copies. We ran one ad one day in the Wall Street Journal, and we sold one book. So if you've read the Closers, your name is Ben Gay, and you're from Placerville, California."
That's a good
And
one.
forward, I've got the rights to the book, the rights to edit it, rewrite it, etc. And we turned it into the best-selling book about selling and closing ever written. We sold over 10 million copies when we quit counting 25 years ago.
Ooh,
So
wow.
I don't know how many it's sold now.
Now, are we strictly talking about a few verticals of sales, or you're talking about everything from major account, key account, up and down the street, in-home sales? Anybody who closes, they could use some of
Yeah,
those tips.
we had a qualification that you may be familiar with. If you know, how do you qualify a potential customer for the closers? This is a mirror. If we got fog, you were qualified. It was everybody and anybody.
Right.
And we sold 2 million copies before we let them put it in bookstores uh, because I didn't want to mess with my distributor organization.
Okay.
At the National Communication Center, I had a distributor organization selling my cosmetics and my this, my this, and my this. We
Wow.
just added it to that, but mainly as a sales training device for them. Then the distributors, then they started coming to us saying, "Can I have 50 more? I want to sell these,"
Hmm.
and so on. So it turned into a product almost by accident. Seems like everything in my career is almost an accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another one. And
Well,
then I wrote part 2, and now recently we came out
now
with
you're up
part
to
3, and I've written
ah,
24 books since then. That's the most famous of them.
boy, 24 books. That's something. Now, before we do have to wind it down, uh, all that experience, all those people, even including, like you said, your father starting out, is there any one strict piece of advice through the decades that you can give to some of these young managers now to lead people? Because I always struggle with just getting the basics. The basics to me, manage by walking around and see what your people are doing, and have daily one-on-ones, especially if they're
Yeah.
brand new and you hired them in. But it's hard. Seem like that I can't get away. I'm desking deal. That's just one part of your job. Your other job is these human capital. But do you have any suggestions, ideas, tips that you can give the current leaders out there so they can grow?
Well, the current leaders and salespeople, I've discovered a little trick. 85% of the problems in selling go away when you sell a quality product or service that's competitively priced, doesn't have to be the cheapest, but competitively priced, and you spend your time, your days, talking to people qualified to buy it, qualified geographically, financially, religious, whatever the qualifications are. Spend your time. It's like my brother-in-law once told me. He's a trout fisherman, among other things. And I said, "What's the secret of catching trout?" He said, "I usually go to streams that have trout in them."
That's a good one.
And then
I
one day
like.
in front of a group, somebody asked me, "What are the 3 things that," I hate questions like that because you never have 3 things in mind, but what are the 3 things that Dr. Hill taught you? It was a group of mastermind type people. 3 things Dr. Hill taught you. And I heard myself saying, I hadn't thought about it, but it really was true. Number 1 was integrity in all things you do. Number 2 was focus. When you're
Mm.
doing something, focus. And number 3 was take action.
Ooh.
Everybody who's ever taken a shower has had a great idea. Some of us get out, dry off, write it on the notepad right outside your shower stall, and go take action.
Wow.
Most have forgotten the idea before they dry off.
Totally agree. Totally agree with you. But with that, Ben, I'm going to have to wind it down. Any parting thoughts? Because underneath I have the closers and I have your 800 number. Any other way they can contact you if they don't understand 800 numbers? Is there
I
is
hope
there a
to God by
website?
now they do.
Is there a website or anything that they can go to?
Well, let me send you to a place that has all of my material currently featured with special pricing and free shipping, better
Okay.
than my own website. Tell them to go to store, get out your pens, stores, STORES ebay.com/ all one word, Ronzoni Books, RONZONE Books, BOOKS. And they still bring them to me before they ship them, so they will be signed and dated, special pricing, and free shipping.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, once again, folks, the incomparable, the legendary Ben Gay, we do thank you. I wish I had more time, but I have to run. But it's been a pleasure. For someone so successful at a young age with that mindset, being around a whole lot of successful people and making them more successful, boy, you make me laugh. I like some of the analogies that you use. It's very good. Nice talking to you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Okay, and to the gang out there, we'll do it again next week. But as always in parting, you go out and make it a champion.